We're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Today, we're focused on Star Trek, the animated series. I'm not laughing because of that. I'm laughing because of our friend Ruben, who is the Obey Me. Is that this character that you're today? Is Obey Me? I love that. You got the green hair. It's perfect. Glasses. You're the entity. It's perfect. It's perfect. So for those of you who don't know, because you're
the entity is muted. I can't hear what it's saying.
We can't hear him. I didn't. I swear I didn't mute you, Ruben. You muted yourself. Yeah. I guess you're gonna stay on mute. Unmute yourself.
Oh, I didn't realize you were talking to me.
You've been mute the whole time.
Obey
We didn't
me.
hear. Yeah, we didn't hear the obey me. Anyways, we're kicking off a brand new discussion series. And for those of you who don't know, Ruben shows up in cosplays. It's a shtick. And
I'm
this
trying to
one's...
see if you can see like your own reflection in my glasses. These glasses are super reflective, huh?
They are.
Ruben's slowly tripping out. I am too. So is the Enterprise. There's a lot to discuss in this episode. But yes, we're starting our animated series discussion series. It will be weekly. We're going to come on here and talk episode by episode, have a casual and informal conversation, as is our tradition. We might have a few cool guests, such as one of them actually is in the audience right now, and that's Geek Filter, Aaron Harvey, who along with Rich Shepis wrote the book on the animated series, which
goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which is so cool.
What an honor. Wow.
Yes, it's very cool. Thanks for coming in the audience there and saying hello in the chats, Aaron. Aaron is an amazing designer and artist, so check out his work and follow him on Twitter. You can follow him at Geek Filter, the same handle as in YouTube. And I'm just so excited that we're covering the animated series because part of why I appreciate it way more than I did when I was a kid is because of that book, Aaron's enthusiasm, Fathery's enthusiasm, and there's a lot of fans of the animated series, so I'm actually really excited. And I haven't actually seen it in earnest, like in sequential order, in like 20 years. So it's kind of cool. I've been binging a little bit ahead just because it's so easy. It's like 30 minutes. So I'm excited about
how did you watch it previously?
It was like randomly on TV when I was a kid. And so, not randomly, it was on at a set time, but it was a Saturday morning thing where,
that was more than 20 years ago. I don't know where it was playing on Saturday morning in
it was
2002,
something like
but
it was
It was on Nickelodeon for a little bit.
Yeah, it was on Nickelodeon in the
90s,
in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and then I would watch it on Nickelodeon as well.
That's where I discovered it. This was actually the first episode of the animated series I ever saw, just by coincidence. I saw the first episode first on Nickelodeon.
I can't remember what my first episode was because I was so small. So I said 20 years, but it was way more. You're right. I'm 44 years old. So it was like when I was really wee, as our friend Robbie would say, that I watched it. So yeah, it was like more like 40 years ago that I watched it. No, but I watched it randomly a lot on Nickelodeon or whenever it was on. I own it on DVD. I don't know if there's a remaster on Blu-ray. I didn't check. Is there one, Fathery? Do you know?
Yeah, it's been on Blu-ray for like 10 years.
I gotta get the Blu-ray now. That's awesome.
More than that, yeah. But and it was on Netflix in HD for a long time, and it's on Paramount Plus in HD now, which is where I assume most people would watch it in 2022. Well, it's the only place where it's streaming in the United States.
It's the whole reason I got Paramount Plus. So.
Well,
before we get into the discussion, actually, this is a good opportunity for
no. I think it was 2006. I think the blue. Or no, that was the DVD, and yeah, then the Blu-ray was 20. I don't know, before the 50th anniversary, it was already out on Blu-ray because then they included it in that 50th anniversary box set that had the first 6 movies and all the original series and all the animated series.
So that's how you discovered it. That's how I discovered it. How about you, Ruben, and how about you, Adam?
I have never watched all of the animated series. I mean, I was vaguely aware of it growing up, and I would watch the original series, The Next Generation, in the 80s and 90s. But I always kind of sort of wrote it off, or thought, oh, that was kind of a weird thing they did in the 70s for a little bit. And I think we were chatting a little bit before the stream began. I don't think a lot of people took it too seriously back then. I think these days animation is taken more seriously, and there's more of an effort to kind of integrate all the different shows. But yeah, I had seen a couple episodes here and there on Nickelodeon, and then actually, I think as a graduation present for some friends from high school, bought me a VHS of the Infinite Vulcan, kind of as a lark. So I watched that one a fair amount. Then maybe I saw one or two when it was on Netflix. But other than that, I hadn't paid attention at all. But since kind of getting back into the original series the last couple of years, and then on social media, I've been exposed to a lot of people who really say great things about it. So animation isn't necessarily my bag, but I thought, well, let's give it a try, and it's certainly TOS adjacent, if nothing else. So yes, I'm looking forward to watching them all in order and really getting a sense of this show.
Star Trek continues in animation. For those of you who didn't know, Obey Me.
Obey Me.
What was your first exposure? Are you old enough to where it came? I forget your age, but are you old enough where it came? What year did it premiere again, guys?
No, it came out in
74.
74. So I was born in
Oh,
76.
okay.
1973. The episode
73.
actually premiered September 8th, same day as the original series, but in 73.
To show you how unprepared I am for this casual and informal discussion, I wrote down the star date, but I forgot to look up what.
Well, you just run some math on that, and it works out to September 8th, 1970.
By the way, Father, I know you know star dates better, or maybe you other guys or someone in the audience, but are those star dates like in line with like being right after TOS kind of
the original
ended?
series star dates make no sense. They're all over the place.
Okay.
There's star dates in the animated series that are all like, some of them are like earlier than the original series. Some of them are later. The Strange New Worlds does the same thing, right? The star dates in Strange New Worlds are all over the place too. So Gene Roddenberry said we should look at star dates as like something that won't make sense to a 20th or I guess now 21st century person. But if you lived in the 23rd century, you would know exactly what date that was when you heard the star date. So I always think it's kind of silly when people try to figure out the star. We're not supposed to comprehend that.
Hey, everyone's got their thing. Ruben, so aside from the star date, what were you doing? What do you remember? How do you remember being exposed to the animated series first?
Well, a lot like Sub Commander. I knew of it. I would catch it. Like I remember back in the day when we had those weird like TV 33 and Channel 29 and those random weird little channels. I would catch a random episode on something like that, and then years later, a friend having like episodes on a VHS, like recorded from somewhere. They looked terrible, and then a few episodes here and there. Like I never watched it. I've never watched the show from start to finish, and I've probably never seen every episode. I'm positive. But I have seen this episode because once it started, I was like, "Oh, I remember this."
Yeah,
so
I've
we'll
seen
see
this
as we go
episode a
along.
few times.
There'll probably be episodes where I'm like, "I don't remember this at all." But yeah, I've never watched it. I don't think from start to finish. Probably never seen every episode. So yeah, this will be interesting.
Good on. All right, cool. So we got a couple of animation series newbies. One guy who's like seen it like out of order, and Father who loves it. So this is exciting.
I've seen every episode of the animated series at least 3 times just since like COVID happened. So
Goodness. Wow.
So Father, tell us what happens in this episode. This return, Star Trek continues, and we join the crew back here in space, and they're going beyond the fringes of our galaxy.
Yeah, you say like we like we join the crew again, but it's like like no time has passed. This is just the way the way a lot of people view it, as just like this is just basically season 4 of the original series. But yeah, we start off with the Enterprise doing some star charting. They're out on the fringe parts of the galaxy, and they are pulled into a dead star where they encounter a mysterious, ancient, derelict ship and go aboard and discover that the crew had purposely destroyed their ship, where they find a creepy message, a recording of, oh, there's a evil life form that's trying to escape. We must do everything to keep it here. And if you are seeing this message, you are in danger. And the evil entity possesses the Enterprise itself. It follows them back to their ship and tries to take control and tries to escape. And Kirk has to basically do a very Kirk-like thing and bluff the entity, beat it in a game of chicken, act like he's going to crash into the dead star to get the thing to leave, and then they abandon it there because it was such an asshole that didn't really give them much of a choice, and so it's left to be lonely and abandoned, and they go back to their star charting, and that's the episode.
I feel like this is like an episode that's inspired a lot of subsequent Star Trek ideas. To me, I was really delighted to like that way the way you described it, especially like reminds me of like basically like the God entity in Star Trek 5. Like it's kind of trapped on this planet and lonely and like wants to get away.
Needed
and,
a
like,
ship.
Yeah, and it needed a starship and stuff like that. So yeah, that like I wonder if I wonder how many other things, but like also just like the giganticness of that ship was like
Aren't there like
you know
3 TOS episodes like that?
well, yeah, there are.
It's
But
not
like
really anything new for Star Trek at this point.
this was unique because like it was looking for like a starship, and then also like it, like what is Kirk said, I wrote it down here, beyond the fringe of our galaxy. They're exploring outside our galaxy, so they might have crossed the Great Barrier right before this episode started, and like things are huge out here, like that derelict alien ship and stuff like that, and it reminded me of the 10C, and I wondered, I mean, is that a coincidence, or were the writers going, oh, things outside the galaxy are big, like that big ship we saw in the animated series. So it's pretty cool to see these little, I don't know, I see these connections. What did you guys think of this episode?
Well, this was my first time ever watching it. I had no idea what to expect from it at all. And it's 21 minutes out of my morning, so that was a big ask. So I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, it was interesting to see it was written by Sam Peoples, who I'm sure we all know also wrote the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, and there was where they also go outside of the galaxy, or at least on the edge. And it had a very interesting tone to me. It didn't feel very original series esque to me in terms of the tone. I mean, some of the sci-fi concepts, yes, I definitely got that same feeling about the alien in Star Trek Five and being like isolated on this planet and sort of malevolent. And there really was a kind of a cold sense of grandeur and mystery about the universe, which was very interesting to me. I did like that, but I think the thing I'm gonna I don't want to say struggle with, but will stick out to me a little bit as someone who really likes the original series is when you're watching animation. None of those actors or actually perform next to each other, so they're reading lines rather than performing with each other. So
I
Yeah,
think
there's
I
a
like
this
to, I
one they
like to
did,
picture
though.
them like smoking cigarettes, like on a shades.
I
And
think
they're
this
just
is
like,
the one
Captain,
episode.
the phasers are going off or whatever. Sorry, I'll do that again. Sorry.
If I recall correctly, though, this is the one episode where they actually were all being recorded together.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, I mean, that's interesting to know. But certainly my impression of it was, a little flatter than some of the original series acting. But interesting. The ideas were interesting. I did like that idea of the. Actually, it reminded me a little bit of Alien. The movie Alien, where they encounter the alien
Oh yeah.
spacecraft and that have been taken over, and watch out, there's a distress signal, and then it turns out to have this kind of malevolent force inside of it. But it's nice to see. It's nice to see the characters back again and like doing things, saying lines that I have no idea what they're going to say. So yeah, it was an enjoyable little watch. I mean, nice to see some continuity too with some of the props they were using. You kind of recognize from the original series, and obviously the sound effects, even though the music is different, it's sort of kind of like a 70s up tempo version of the original series music. So yeah, there's a lot familiar about it, and then a lot that was new. But yeah,
They also managed to get like the very popular tropes of doing the away mission and like the ship in danger emergencies, like the whole fiasco or disaster that was occurring in engineering when Scotty was stuck in
Right,
the
stuck in that
thing. And
tin
yeah,
can or
it's
whatever it
like,
was. Yeah.
yeah, so I really appreciate it. These kind of like Star Trek tropes kind of bleeding into the anime. It made it feel very like connected to TOS for me. Very cool. So you think you'll stick with it and keep going? How
Oh
far are
yeah,
you?
yeah.
Oh, good, good.
I
Okay,
just watched. I'm just gonna watch them before. I watched it this morning, and I'll do the same thing next time
nice.
we
So
I
you're
like to
watching
I like to
Saturday morning
think
cartoons.
That's right.
That's
Saturday morning
awesome.
cartoons.
I
I
like
love
to
it.
That's
think that
awesome.
the alien next to Sulu ate Checkov, but that's normal for his species, so everybody was just cool with it. That's how you gain promotions in the species. So they're like, oh well, that's how they do it.
Wait, so I don't know why I thought Chekhov was in this episode, but he's not, right?
It's not in any of them,
Chekhov
right?
is not in any
In any of
episode.
them. Oh, I totally have to change my description on YouTube. I lied.
Walter Koenig really wanted Chekhov to be able to show up at least as like a background character and tried to put him in the Infinite Vulcan. Walter wrote an episode. He didn't get to
He
be
didn't get to be.
Chekhov
Yeah,
in
that's
anything,
right.
but he got to write an episode. But yeah, for whatever reason, they never allowed him to be in there.
By the way,
I
that
don't know.
was
I don't
cool
know
that
how
you.
much you want to talk about like the show itself beyond just like this episode, in case people are less familiar with it. But and initially they weren't going to bring many of the actors back at all, and there's
Right.
a famous story about how Leonard Nimoy kind of forced them to at least bring back Nichelle and George because he thought it
Yeah,
would be messed up if they replaced the people of color after they made such a big deal of the diversity in the original series.
absolutely. I love this. I love. Speaking of Uhura, I love this shot. I love that there's like these. There's a lot of tight. They're working in the, I guess, the 4:3 aspect ratio or format, and so there's a lot of tight shots. But they, I just love them. I think that's really cool how they chose to illustrate them. And yeah, we do get the actual original performers acting, and I can't believe Chekhov's not in it. I can't believe I didn't realize that. I just kind of like put him in there in my imagination for some reason. But thanks for pointing that out, Fathery. What about you? Well, what do you think of this episode, Fathery, specifically?
I mean, it has the cool distinction of being the first, and Samuel Peebles coming back. A lot of the original series writers do come back for the animated series, so I think that also gives it a lot of validation, that it makes it feel like more of a continuation of the original series. I don't know if this is like one of the most memorable episodes. It is a little I guess like run of the mill in terms of like quality. I think there's some ones that stand out much more than this, but I think tonally it for me it's very much in line with the original series, and some of it kind of feels more of like what they would do if they had like the allowances that come with animation, as far as like visually showing things or just like more sci-fi concepts. Like I think like that the design of that ship was really cool. I think like the
Yeah.
design of the alien when they get like the recorded message, that like, yeah, like if they had like more time and money, they would have had like more creatures that they would have had like Hua Chang or someone build like like an elaborate puppet, like, and we saw things like that a little bit with like the Carbomite maneuver, or maybe like the Tholian web. But yeah, I think this is the type of like creature design they would have been going for if they could. And the idea that like, oh yeah, like the scary creepy looking dude on the video recording, that guy was actually kind of cool. He was like trying to do, him and his crew were being brave and trying to sacrifice themselves to stop
Mm.
this actual evil thing. So that, again, that's more kind of like that Star Trek ethos, which would have been very new in the 60s, with the idea of like yeah, like the weird looking creature is not going to be evil. It can be like a good entity that we should treat as like an equal and treat with respect and stuff. So I like that. The non-corporeal being freaking out is very, very TOS. And then something that when we talked to Rich Shepus, the co-author with Aaron on the guide to the animated series, we talked to him back on Text Trek 105. If people want to go hear more on this as well as the other episodes of the animated series, we covered all of them on Text Trek number 105 and 106. But Rich Shepus talked about how that theme of loneliness, like this creature is being lonely, and how that was something that they used a lot in the original series, like Trelane. He just wanted playmates. He just wanted to play with people. Or Charlie X, he just wanted friends. He was
I mean, Star Trek's a little obsessed with lonely, godlike.
the lonely
entities.
gods.
Mm.
So yeah, it's
Apollo,
definitely.
yeah.
Or even Apollo. He just wanted a lover. So we get that with the creature at the end when it's abandoned at the end, and that is the thing that does give this the most memorable moment, is the creature just like,
So
please don't
lonely.
leave me.
Yeah, I'm so lonely, or whatever it says.
Maybe
yeah.
if you hadn't been such a jerk,
Yeah.
Jill points out, I think the plot and dialogue was more adult than some. A child would enjoy it on a certain level, but not get all of that. I'm pleased to say that, yeah, I find the animated series to be enjoyable as an adult, and it's in different ways than I liked it when I was a kid. And so,
Right,
yeah,
but it
it's
wasn't
a really
it wasn't really
cool
made
show.
for the
Well, I mean,
children
that
audience.
was also animation back then. Kind of did that on purpose. Like, it's not like now we're like, oh, this thing's made for 4 to 6 year olds. Like, the animation was like, let's make a cartoon, but let's put in jokes so the adults can enjoy it when they're watching with their kids. That's why when you watch Bugs Bunny or something when you're older,
Mhm.
you suddenly get 20 times more jokes, because it's like, oh, all these jokes
Right.
fly over your head when you're a kid, but when you're an adult, you're watching it with your kid, you're like, oh, I get this now. Like, it was meant to sort of entertain both at the same time. That's good, in my opinion. Good animation has always done that throughout the history.
But I think the idea with the animated series was always, let's try to do a continuation of the original series. Gene Roddenberry, despite him trying to dismiss the show later in the 80s, back in the 70s, he took this project very seriously. He wanted it to feel like, like adult Star Trek, like that same type of, he never wanted Star Trek to be like Lost in Space. He never wanted it to be like that, like that goofy, jokey science fiction. Like, he wanted it to be serious stuff, which they hadn't really done a lot of on TV before Star Trek. It was a lot more goofy stuff. So they brought in a lot of the original series writers. A lot of the stories they used were actually ideas that they floated back in the 60s that they almost did for the original series. Dorothy Fontana, we should also talk about how she was in charge of the animated series. If you want to call someone a showrunner on it, they didn't really use that term back then, but she would have been the showrunner of the animated series. And she, all her life, she took this very seriously and always considered it to be like the fourth season of the original series. So even back then, I think they weren't really trying to write for a children audience. They were trying to show that, look, there's still like longevity in the Star Trek franchise. We can still do more Star Trek. It doesn't have to die. It can continue. And eventually we did get the movies and then spin-off shows and everything else.
Well, it's
And
such a good. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think it's important to say also that, like, yeah, even though we're talking about it with memories of childhood viewings, like, I'm not trying to say that, like, animation is only for kids. Like, it's definitely a show I take seriously, and, like, but I did happen to watch it when I was a kid and have fond memories of it being entertaining to me as a kid. So yeah. But sorry, what were you gonna say, Adam?
I was just going to say it's a very interesting placeholder because, when it came out in 73, right? 73, 74 is when it was running. I mean, Star Trek was already becoming really popular in syndication. I mean, the original series was,
Right.
and NBC was already interested in, like, hey, let's bring the show back as a TV show. But, they destroyed all the sets and everything, so they couldn't just start it up again. And, Roddenberry was very cagey too. It's like he knew, okay, maybe there's still some potential in this, but what kind of TV show, or could we possibly do a movie or something like? And he wasn't prepared to, like, and they weren't prepared to, like. NBC was asking for a pilot, or none of this. I don't know all the details of it, but it's like, you've already got a pilot. You already have those 79 episodes we did before. So this was kind of like a way to keep interest and enthusiasm, something new for Star Trek, without, I guess, overcommitting to what form Star Trek would eventually take. As we all know, it took the form of feature films instead of a live action TV show. But I think his attachment to the franchise and his business acumen are also on display here in this series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it also was a way to give people some work, because there was a writer's strike in 73, but a lot of those writers they were allowed to write for animation, but they just couldn't write for
Oh.
any like
Interesting.
full-length live
Okay.
action show. So that's another reason why they got so many of those TOS writers to come in and write for. So it's kind of a favor, to his friends and stuff, those people that he had worked with before.
By the way, in our audience, Uncle Arthur points out, and I got to witness this. I think I'm the one who recorded it that you posted. Text Trek, that's Fathery, told Walter Koenig at the recent Chicago convention that the giant Spock skeleton appeared in Lower Decks, and Mr. Koenig was amused by that. Yeah, he did seem amused.
Yeah, we
So,
should
yeah,
we
that's
should
cool.
talk about that when we get to the Infinite Vulcan.
For sure. We'll have to try to line up that clip so I can play it as well. It was really fun.
I don't think you recorded that though. That was someone else.
No, I did.
Oh, okay. I've never seen your recording of it.
I'm pretty sure I did, and that you reposted it, but we'll just double check. Father, he has memory issues, or I do. Well, I know I do, so who knows?
Okay, I'll make you a bet that I never posted a recording that you made of that. If I win, then you have to.
Uh-oh. This
don't
is not
know.
like live.
We'll talk about. We'll
live
figure this out
YouTube. Yeah, I was
later.
gonna be like, what are you gonna make me do?
There you go. It's got
What's
to
that,
be said
Ruben?
live to be on record.
Father's good.
I know. Arthur found a video someone else posted on YouTube of that, but I didn't see. Maybe you recorded it also. I don't know.
Well, I know I recorded it. I just didn't know. I don't remember if you saw it or reshared it. But I could have sworn I twoed it live, like I twoed it when it happened.
Nice.
But yeah. So yeah. Anyways, sorry we had to figure that out on air. Your audience.
Isn't this a cool ship design, though? Look at that. I'm just looking at the ship here.
Well,
Just bringing it back to this. It's like, it reminds me of, like, I don't know, seed pods in the wind or something like that. I mean, it is neat that they, with animation, you do have so much more freedom to, with the kinds of ships and aliens and just visually what you can do with the show.
I like that there's a lot of Uhura describes it really nicely. She's like, it's
Right,
beautiful, and like and imagine the civilization that built this was like, it was what, 300 million years before, or 300,000 years before, I think, or something like that. It was like a long time
I think it
ago.
was
The
million.
ship's been, it's been drifting out here for like a long time, and no, it is beautiful actually. And I have to say, like, I would love to see some of this stuff revisited, because let me see if I can pull up this image. The actual bridge of the alien ship is really cool. Oh, and we got to talk about the life support belts.
Yeah, why didn't they use those in V'ger? Come on.
What are they called in Dune? It just made me think of Dune.
Oh, the shields.
Yeah.
That they use in Dune.
I was like, oh look, they stole the shields in Dune.
Oh, here
Yeah,
it is.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I got it. I'm having trouble with my usual screenshot presentation because I lost it by accident by writing over it. I usually do like a Google PowerPoint thing. But anyways, this is like a really cool set. Like, it's so wild looking too. Like, I really like it. That's the other thing I was really impressed at, now that I'm like kind of watching Lower Decks. And it's, by the way, Lower Decks is airing right now. So if you like Star Trek animation, there's 2 things you can watch, which is pretty awesome. But
there's 3, right? With Prodigy
coming back, yeah. So yeah, you can watch, and if you haven't watched Prodigy, there's Star Trek animation's big. It's great. There's like a huge chunk of it now of Star Trek that's animated, which is pretty cool. And I hope there's more to come. But yeah, the other thing I appreciated was like how like they actually like, there's a continuity between, like, I don't know if this continues to be the case, but there's like a continuity between like the backgrounds. Like, so the background artists are like really great on this show. So you kind of like see this door on the side, and in the next shot, like, where it is. Like, they had a really good idea of like building these like animated sets, and that's unusual, I feel like, for a lot of more, I guess, animation of that time, where it was like I feel like it was a lot simpler, and Star Trek feels more complicated than those animations. I think I heard a lot of critiques over the years about the animation being like, I don't know, cheap looking or bad. And I don't think that's true at all. I think it's got a style, like a distinct style of its own. And maybe you're not into that style, but I would call it like cheap or bad. What do you guys think about that?
Think about what?
About
The
the
animation.
animation?
I mean, it has its limitations. The technique that they used at Filmation was made to be very cheap and quick and able to all be done in the United States without having to, outsource something to animators at a studio overseas.
Right. Which is
So,
common for animation pretty much throughout all of its history, really.
right. The thing with the animated series, it was actually the most expensive animated series on the air at the time because they had all the voice talent, with
Right.
Shatner and Nimoy and everyone else. So as a result, if they hadn't have gone with someone who could, do it quick and fast and cheap like Filmation, we wouldn't have been able to had an animated Star Trek show. So I think they were at probably like the right company for the job. And I love like a lot of the stuff that like their artists bring to the table, like a lot of the designs, like these ship interiors here that you're showing of the alien ship. I think that they are kind of that same that colorful, I guess today what we would call kind of like retro futurism, but it feels like what they would have done in the original series. If they had like more time and more budget each episode, I think we would get these very elaborate looking sets and things like that.
Yeah, it has yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. It has its limitations, but it does have its charm. And I got to say, William Shatner looks great. He's in great shape. He hasn't gained any weight at all. He's looking, the hair is great.
Nimoy's teeth are way wider.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, I mean, I'd never watched the show. I did watch He-Man a lot, which had a lot of the same kind of things with using like the background cells or whatever they do, or the same or changing the background cells and just having the same animation on top. So some of them definitely do have a little charm. I especially love just the technique of having one person's face dominate the foreground, and then there's some action in the background, or how they sort of run towards the camera with their their little arms going back and forth. I don't know, but yeah, no, I mean, the animation it's distinctive anyway.
I mean, I would say it's pretty good, decent for the time, considering the time and everything else that was on the air at the time. Like there wasn't really a lot of high-end animation like we have now, where you can compare
Sure.
like Lower Decks to something like Arcane, and then it's like, well, that's kind of a weird comparison. It's two different shows trying to do two different things.
I mean, there was like Warner Brothers animation and like Disney animation.
Right, but for TV, most of that stuff was very basic, very repetitive, very like. I mean, they do a
Sure.
lot of that here in this too. So I don't think it looked great, but I don't think it looked bad either. I think
Yeah,
it was
like
pretty good
the
for the time.
the comparison for this should be things like Johnny Quest or
Right,
Scooby Doo.
right. When you look at things of that era like that, this was pretty on par. Maybe even I would say a little bit better in some cases,
That's
because
what
they
I'm
did.
saying. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's better than it's whatever you
there's a lot
class
more
as its
detail in the backgrounds, which is rare for animation at the time, where they usually would just like building, flat color window, like they wouldn't put much. Like, look at this shot. Like, look how much stuff there's there. So much
well, it's
details
sticking
in
to
that
the
shot.
Strange New Worlds thing, right?
You
Like
know,
and actually I think in ways that you couldn't do in live action then. You can certainly do this now a lot more, the scale, at least you can do this now on TV, which is cool in live action, but like back then some of the scale that you see in this you couldn't see. So it's cool to have like a bridge to the Star Trek universe that's a bigger, like a window into a larger universe, and expand that universe, literally going outside of our galaxy even, and stuff like that. So yeah. Um, let's see here. In the comments we got, they don't have repeating backgrounds like Scooby Doo. They don't have to have special neck designs to turn their heads. There are a lot of
but they use a lot of static backgrounds. It's not repeating backgrounds, but static backgrounds. So it's not like they're doing the same thing Scooby Doo did, just slightly different.
there's a lot of like techniques that they're using, I think, from what I can observe. Just we can dive deeper into the animation, maybe, when we've had a chance to kind of like get more animator folks on here. But from what I can observe, they do a lot of cool techniques to save time, like of like where you would like the explosions, for example, they scale them differently and things like that. And they're even using like I forget
Well,
what this is
like that
called,
was
but
is a perfect example of them saving money because the explosions are basically a separate layer pasted on top of the image. It's not interact. Like if you notice, a lot of the explosions don't really interact with the actual. It's just like the explosions on top of whatever's happening. It's
right.
not really like
But
it's not animated exploding. It's an
right.
animated explosion put on top of the image.
But it does
Which
seem like they
I'm
have more
nitpicking that.
frames. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it seems like this show has more frames to tell the story that are like fresh, and they do it like they use techniques like using like not moving the faces like too much, like the faces kind of move quickly from a profile to a to like a head-on thing or whatever. But you'll notice the eyes are very expressive on all the characters. Like there's a lot of animation focused on expression and like like so that they don't repeat. But yeah, there's a lot of techniques that like if you're an animation fan that are transparent, I guess these days, or like not like or used differently these days, because technology totally has changed animation. I actually wanted to be a Disney animator when I was a kid, and I studied animation for a little while, but I never got into like the animation transition from like hand drawn to computer made, or drawn on a computer or whatever. So it's a whole different animal today. Like Lower Decks is made in a total different way, but a lot of the conventions are the same, and you need economy when you have a time budget, right? Like, so you have to like
Yeah,
they have to
for
like
sure.
crank these things out.
I
So
mean, I'm
yeah,
pretty sure Lower Decks, Rick and Morty, and cartoons of those ilk are all made by the same software. They just tweak it for their needs. Whatever their, you create your Lower Decks backgrounds, and I forget it's an animation software. It has a name to it. I can't remember what it was called. What it's called. But you create your backgrounds and whatever. Now it's easier than it was for these people back then who had to kind of do all this shit like by hand. So that was my one PG-13. Um, so it's interesting. I mean, you're always trying to save money because you want to animate as little as you have to. There's no point in reanimating the same things over and over if you
Right.
don't have
That's
to.
why they would reuse things like the famous
Right.
one in the animated series is like the
It's
run
just
cycle.
illogical. I
When
mean, unless you're gonna do something like of that quality, where you want that quality, sort of like not even because even if you watch like behind the scenes of like things of later in the 80s, like Akira or whatever, that Japanese animation stuff that they were doing, which was light years ahead of what Disney was doing at the time in a lot of ways, but they were still doing the same tricks. Like, okay, how do we create less work? Like, which is logical.
like when Kirk is running off of the transporter to Mr. Kyle
And he
to
knocks his
try to
ass
stop
out.
the entity. But he has like, how he's like raising his arms up like that when he's running. And that's like the same way that like he runs into engineering later when Scotty is being crushed under something. And Spock has like that same animation. Like whenever like they run towards something, it's always like that same shot of like the arms coming up
Right,
like
right.
this.
And just
But yeah, there's a lot of things that
frame,
they
frame,
reuse.
frame.
But I find that charming. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
like
I
yeah.
do too.
with the original series. I mean, how many times did they reuse Sulu looking backwards from the Corbomite
Right.
maneuver
Right?
and
Yeah,
placing
perfect
something on the
example.
screen? I mean, ultimately, it's like, I think you have limitations, but you have creativity within those limitations. So I mean, you could look at the original series sets and know this is styrofoam or this is that, but
Right.
thinking,
Well, I was
oh,
gonna
isn't it
say
interesting? They
they
did
even
trapezoids or they did this color, or you can still be creative within those limitations.
I was gonna say too, even in the original series, they reuse shots. They'll flip shots. They'll, they'll you reuse a shot, flip it, and to do some color grading on it, so you can't really tell it's from the other. Like you're always trying to save time and money in basically any production. So
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek Six reused the bird of prey
Exploding
blowing
bird of
up.
prey.
Like if you don't have to do it again, why do it? If there's a great shot of it already, just plop it in there. No one's gonna remember. Or very few people will.
Were you guys as excited as me to see Mr. Kyle
I was excited for
back?
that stash.
Mr. Kyle's 70s porn star look. Sorry, but
Well, this is before he has the full goatee in the Wrath of
it
Khan.
is. Yeah, no, that was fun. It was fun. I mean, that's clearly James Doohan barely doing an English accent versus a Scottish one, but no, it's great to see a little continuity and also a little update. Why not have a mustache?
Okay, so I have a wild theory about Chief Kyle and Mr. Kyle. Like, have you guys heard the debate, like, where people are freaking out because, like, Chief Kyle doesn't look like Chief Kyle later or Mr. Kyle, or whatever you want. Like,
Yeah, we've talked about it before, right? That
right.
we think that they're husbands.
Yeah, I think they're husbands, and this
Okay.
proves it because that's totally a daddy mustache. And so there's a Chief Kyle and there's a Mr. Kyle, and they both may have been chiefs for a time, but they might have. Isn't Kyle a lieutenant, right? So I don't know. My theory holds up, I think. So thanks for remembering, Father. It seems you adopt that theory too. But
Yeah,
I
we
do
talked
love
about that a
seeing-
lot during Strange New Worlds.
That's my theory. I think they're husbands, and so we're gonna find that out at some point, or they're married. But what happens later to Chief Kyle that we see on Strange New Worlds? I don't know, because we don't see him around. Maybe he just gets reassigned to another ship or something, or who knows? People in the future get divorced too.
Well, there's also 400 people on the ship, so
That's true.
There's room for him to still be there.
Still be there. It's true. But yeah, it was exciting to see. I guess he's still a lieutenant. Is that right? With the one stripe?
Yeah.
Did they pay
one-
attention to ranks in the animated series, Fathery? Do you know?
I mean, about as good as the original series or Strange New Worlds does. Both those shows seem to not always be on top of the uniform matching the character's rank. But yeah, I mean, that's something that I think that there probably are goofs on, because there's a few like little animation errors here and there. There's also sometimes where they intentionally left animation cells out in order to be able to complete the shot. So you might notice, at some point, like someone's arm might disappear, stuff like that. If you freeze frame, you can find a lot of interesting things like that.
Yeah.
We see Sulu commanding the ship in this episode, which is cool, and we don't really get to know him yet, but that's Eric's, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
on
the
the
guy who
left.
ate Checkov.
Yep. The guy who I thought was Checkov, the guy who I thought who I popped Checkov in my subconscious.
We can
and-
pretend the guy in red is Checkov. He just changed departments for a little bit. Sort of looks like
He lost his
Chekhov.
shirt. Someone lent him.
Isn't there some interesting story about how they could, even though this was the first episode, they couldn't broadcast it first because George Takei had a few lines spoken, and he was also running for like a city councilman, and you could only have
Right.
X many minutes of TV airtime. But yeah, something like that. So
Does
they
the
went with
alien
a
have
different
a name?
episode where George Takei didn't have much to say.
Does anyone know if the alien has a name?
Eric's
Eric's.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about that
Yeah.
guy. the original.
And his species,
voiced by James Doohan, but we don't hear him speak in this episode.
Oh, okay. I was about to say.
and his species returns in Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah, the Edosians, right?
Edosians, yeah.
I know
They
people have
mention
suggested
Edosians in DS9.
if they ever do another Kelvin movie, now that the actor who played Chekhov has died in those, they should use CGI to have an Eric's type
Yeah.
character in his place.
I've been saying that for 6 years.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Oh, he looks like he inspired Saru a little bit.
Oh,
He does
I
a
never
little
thought
bit.
about that.
Yeah,
He's a very complicated design too. A lot of times in animation, there's an instinct to keep things kind of simple. But yeah, with Eric, they're just like, no, he's gonna have like the most complicated angular face. It'll just be like a different profile from every angle. We're gonna give him
Yeah.
3 arms, 3 legs. Like how do you animate like 3 legs? Walking and stuff like that's so complicated. But again, something. You can be a little bit more imaginative in animation when you don't have to worry about like making it work in live action.
he reminds me of, I don't know if you ever played the old Sierra Space Quest games from way back, but in the very first Space Quest, there's an alien underground that appears as a giant head, and the head looks very similar to Eric's,
interesting.
although he's not orange. But yeah,
I didn't
that's
play
what he-
Space Quest, but I remember folks raving about that game. This thing frightened the hell out of me when I saw it. Probably when I was a kid, and definitely now. Still, like, I'm glad we know why we don't see this thing again, right? Like in Starfleet, it's like this death machine. Like, what'd you guys think of this?
I mean, it kind of makes sense, like a defense module that can pop pop out and stun intruders or something. It would kind of make more sense for them to keep using this more in Star Trek, with as many times we see like ships being taken over, you know.
Yeah.
Well, but you can take this thing
I mean,
over
you would
and then
think
it's a
they would have
disaster.
improved, protection protocols for ships by this point, but they don't seem to care. And Star Trek, whatever, it happens.
We know it can be taken over by an entity, so I think a good old phaser is. If I were captain, I'd have that thing uninstalled, and I'd say everyone just carry a sidearm.
I think that is the worst idea to have on a bridge of a starship. If that thing decides to malfunction and knock out everybody, and you fly you into a star, it's not a good idea.
So at one point there was a refit where instead of having like that window at the top of the bridge dome that we zoom into in the
They
cage,
installed this,
yeah, they replaced that with this thing. There's also an extra turbo lift on the
That's right. Yeah,
on the
at
bridge
front.
of the Enterprise here,
Oh, I hadn't noticed
which
that. That's
appears
crazy.
in the technical manual. The Franz Joseph technical
Yeah.
manual came out, I think, shortly
That's
after this
right.
show, and so he included that in his tech manual.
Here's another shot. Here's a shot of it
It's like the
taken
disco ball.
over.
The Death Disco Ball, as
That's
Joel in our
right.
live audience
That's
is
right,
calling
baby.
it.
That's a much better name
It was a
than.
groovy time.
Yeah, and pop culture is asking if that was there in the ceiling in the motion picture, and it was not. They took it down.
But we've never seen this in live action, right? Like not this specifically, but like a bridge defense system. Have we seen that? Is that something Star Trek's done?
No, but I think it's a good idea. I
It's
don't
a good
know.
idea,
They'll seem to
yeah.
not like
Didn't
it,
Strange
but-
New Worlds have like phasers hidden in like the
Yeah, like under the counter, like under the
phasers all over the
consoles.
place on the bridge? I guess that's the next. That was their compromise. We can't have giant disco balls, so let's have phasers hidden all over the bridge.
I was sort of reminded of like the M5 taking over
Oh
the
yeah.
Enterprise in the Ultimate Complete. I mean, they didn't have anything like that, but just again shutting down life support on part of the ship, and I mean, I guess several times the Enterprise was taken over by an intelligence, or a couple times anyway. Or like in Wolf in the Fold, somebody mentioned that in the comments. That was pretty
Oh
similar.
yeah, very
Yeah.
similar to that.
I dig it. There's like this like again, Star Trek borrowing from itself, but a trope that I think most folks like enjoy seeing. And it's that whole like, the ship being taken over and by like a malevolent intelligence, and the crew having to outsmart it in some way. And so I like the resolution that they came up with. Using the gravity, the hypergravity field from the dying star to basically suck the poison out of the Enterprise. It was pretty cool. But yeah, they put up a good fight. I really enjoyed the action. I found myself both times in the I don't know how you guys felt about it, but the tension is palpable in the scene on the bridge when the alien is being translated, when Spock's trying to get the alien message translated, and then whatever's being held behind that door trying to escape. And then also this scene also, and I was like very pleased that it that it worked out, because to me, like, there's been a lot of there's a lot of folks who like to kind of like pick and choose what is Star Trek and stuff like that. But I think for me personally, Star Trek the animated series is an essential part of Star Trek, and it's exciting me with these like stories and these additions to the lore and the canon.
Yeah, I encourage anyone who has fondness of the original series to check out the animated series. I mean, sure, yeah, it is like a little different because like the medium shifted to from live action to animation, but it's just like the same as like there's a lot of good novels out there with the original series characters, or good like other mediums. I've read like some good Star Trek comics in my day, so yeah, I don't think Star Trek has to be limited to just the live action TV show. And I don't, my favorite, I guess, use of Star Trek outside of that initial medium would be the animation. I love a lot of the stuff in the animated series. I love a lot of stuff that the new shows Prodigy and Lower Decks are doing, so I think it works just as well in animation as it does in live action.
100%. Sub Commander needs to recloak in about 8 minutes.
Thank
And we
you.
try to keep these, yeah, and we try to keep these discussions to about an hour. And then in 30 minutes from now, we're gonna go over to Text Trek to get an STLV wrap up. But I think this was did we cover everything in the discussion, guys? Do you think we? I think we talked about every single aspect of it, especially the animation. My
We
goodness.
didn't talk about the force field belts too much, the life support belts.
I think they're a terrible idea, and I'm glad Starfleet stopped using them.
Well, I think Arthur pointed out the fact that originally Margaret Arman, who I think wrote an animated series episode, when she wrote the Tholian Web, or I don't know who wrote. Anyway, they were meant to be used in the Tholian Web, but they decided that was, I don't know, too simple a solution, and they liked the silver lame spacesuits that became famous later. But the idea was preceded the animated series. But it's a neat idea. But I guess I like seeing people in spacesuits if I have the opportunity.
Yeah,
What about you?
visually spacesuits are probably more interesting, but I love the image of them like standing on the outside of that.
That's
ship
true. Yeah,
with,
that is.
with just the belts. Yeah, it really feels like, oh, that is like some advanced future technology right there.
Yeah.
What like this alien drains power? Like the belts are a terrible idea. What if the like at least an EV suit? Like I know you could lose power, but you could have like an auxiliary system that like just injects like a bunch of oxygen or something. I don't know. There's like,
and I think that's why they stopped. That's probably why they stopped relying on them.
Although Aaron points out the support belts 100% would work for the 32nd century. I actually agree with that. So yeah, I would like to see them return in disco. Yeah, that's a good point. And oh my gosh, Aaron, thanks for sticking with us in the chat. I know Aaron's like an expert on the animated series, so when we're figuring things out, it must be a little bit like Aaron, we don't take notes. I don't prepare really, but
Aaron, you need to come join us on here.
Yeah, you need to come join us.
But if you want to hear Aaron talk about the animated series, I mean, he's done it all over the place.
Yeah.
But you can also listen to Text Trek number 106, where we talk about the last half of the animated series, and then in 105 we talk about like the first half, the first 11 episodes with his co-writer Rich Shepis. So check those out. Text Trek 105 and 106.
And Aaron, again, we love him so much, so I'm gonna keep talking about him. But he also does a podcast, and I think it's on hiatus, but it's coming back soon. So you guys can check that out as well. Just follow him. He's really cool. And he wrote the book on the animated series. Father, my uncle has my copy, so I have to go fetch it from him. Do you have your copy handy within to show folks what it looks like?
I can run over to my shelf and grab it.
Go grab it. We'll I'll keep wrapping us up on while you go do that, because it's really whoa.
Hello.
I'm playing with... Oh, I forgot that there's this mode too. The shots, I just want to say while we're waiting, the last thing I'll say is just like, I'm excited about talking about the animated series. As we've seen from this like opening discussion, there's a lot of like things that we're going to be parsing out and talking about, like from our feelings on the animation style to the stories, how it's adding to the Star Trek story at large. So I'm really excited. I hope for more of that. Audience, share what you think about this episode. In our tradition here on Starfleet Boy, even though the ratings don't mean anything. Here, wait, before we finish wrapping up, let me get Father up here. There it is. Yay. It's a beautiful cover too. You can't tell completely because it's the green screen effect, but actually that adds like a sparkle to it.
It does, yeah. I thought that was a feature for us. Oh, I gotta get this book.
But yeah, it's a very cool book. And today happens to be the 3rd anniversary of its release date, if I'm not mistaken. No, I am not mistaken. I saw that on Twitter. So maybe we can all make Aaron happy and order a copy if you don't already have one on Amazon.com. And Aaron, feel free to post the link to it if you can in the chat.
Neat. Yeah, looking forward to looking through that.
Yeah, it's very cool. Maybe it's also at your local bookstore. So go check it out. I've seen it. I think I've seen it at like a bookstore here and there. So yeah. So as is our tradition on Starfleet Boy, we give ratings. They don't really mean anything. They're from the gut. So I'm gonna give this episode a 10. I love it. And I'm so excited. I'm glad that Star Trek animation is bigger than it's ever been, and it's cool to go back and see where it all started. So I also love this discussion that we had. Thank you, audience, for coming. Tell us what you think of this episode. Give us your rating, and I'm gonna kick off the rating and then promote what you got to promote. And you go first, Sub Commander, since you got to leave.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this. I don't really have a context of like how to rate these things, so I guess I'll give it I'll give it a 7 out of 10. It's an interesting idea, interesting. I like the music. You know, I didn't have to hear it over and over again. Would have liked to have a little more kind of funny character moments, but I'm sure those will happen later. So 7 out of 10, and you can follow me at Subcommander T on Twitter. Tonight for TOS Saturday night, we are doing the Deadly Years, so tune in for that if you want. And I'm going to engage Cloak and go back to civilian life. So see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Next week.
Bye. Oh, next week's a big one, right? Yeah, that's gonna be a fun episode to talk about.
Yesteryear. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very exciting. We actually did a viewing of it on Text Trek on your Patreon.
No, we
audience.
didn't. We did the Lorelei signal.
We actually did it, which is the next one after that. So yeah, sorry.
No, I think it's the fourth one.
Oh, the fourth one.
Next one after that is one of our planets is missing.
Ruben, what did you
I could
think?
be mistaken, though.
What are your final thoughts on this episode, and what do you give it as a rating? And of course, it could be a ridiculous rating, as you do.
Final thoughts. It was cool. It was fun watching it. You know, pretty standard for animation and stuff at the time. It was. It kind of. I didn't expect much. You know, I wasn't like holding this up to some sort of standard where I expected some really deep, story. I got what I wanted from it. It was fun. It had interesting sci-fi concepts. And yeah, I give it a rating of obey me. Obey me.
You may have stolen Fathery's rating. Fathery.
doubt
Oh
it.
wait, Ruben, what do you got to promote right now? What are you doing that the audience can go
Just
check you
follow
out
me
at?
on Twitter or Martian. I put up an interview this week with a my last previous interview was with Carol Urban, because I always want to call her Carl Urban, but it's Carol Urban, who was a recording sound mixer. I put up an interview with Nicola Rose, who's the director of a cute rom-com, and if you like Amelie, it's called Goodbye Petrushka. It kind of has a little Amelie vibe, a little indie rom-com. She was the director, so I put an interview with her. And then I have more interviews coming. Bunch of composers. Lots and lots of composers. Follow me on Twitter, rmartian. Martian.
Sorry,
Did your mom just deliver coffee to you?
Yes, but she was joking and saying that it's tea actually, and she was saying I'm your chaiwala. So that's a Urdu for like the person who brings you tea. So
okay.
my chaiwala came in here and gave me tea. So
Well, I learned a new word. Chaiwala.
It might be derogatory, Fathery, but it's like an inside
well-
joke. So yeah, don't ever say it.
Okay. Thanks for the warning on
like
that.
she might have been saying it as if like, oh, I begrudgingly bring you this tea. I have to look it up. So
Okay.
don't quite
Good to know.
don't culturally appreciate that one.
Yeah, I'll leave
Just
that one
alone. Fathery, tell us what your final thoughts on this episode. Anything else you want to share, especially what you're doing on Text Track?
Sure, yeah. Just one last thing on this episode. You know, I like the creepy, the mystery. I like how it escalates into like, oh no, like we're gonna play like a game of chicken with this alien and everything. But the thing I love most about this episode is how casually they treat like this weird, deadly space encounter at the very end when they've resolved everything. They've escaped the entity. They escaped the Dead Star, and Kirk is just back in his chair, just doing another log entry. Like, okay, we're resuming our star charting mission and everything. It's just like, it almost makes me think of Krug in Star Trek 3 when he fights like the giant worm thing on Spock's coffin, and then he's just like, nothing of interest to report here. It's just like that. It's just like, okay, like we just had like this crazy deadly adventure. Our lives are on the line. It's just like, okay, well, just that's just another day at work in Starfleet. Back to doing these star charts. So I love that. I think this is a cool way to start off the series. There's some really great stuff ahead of us that I'm excited to get to. I would rank this episode 300 million years out of Quastar M17.
Awesome, and that's a really great point about M3. I'm glad you brought up Questar M. What was it, 17?
M17,
and actually a great way to end this discussion, to remind us about the original mission of the Enterprise, to explore strange new worlds, charting stars, man, exploring gaseous anomalies. It's all that's all the stuff that happens in between those great adventures.
Yeah, it's almost kind of how like
cool.
Lower Decks treats all this like extraordinary things that happen like so frequently in Star Trek. It's like, yeah, it would become kind of normal that everything is so freaking weird all the time, right?
Yeah.
When they're asking in the this last week's episode of Lower Decks, when they're asking what happened to the captain of the Inglewood, right? And it's like, oh, he got turned into a baby from a temporal fracture or whatever. It's like, yeah, like those are just like the things that would happen all the time. So, but yeah, it's gonna be a really big episode next week. I'm really looking forward to it. And you want me to go ahead and plug my
Yes, please.
my stuff?
Yes, sir.
We will be live in about 28 minutes over on the Text Trek channel, doing a recap of my adventure at Star Trek Las Vegas. Very, very weird, very unusual convention this year, but still a ton of fun. So that'll be fun to talk about. And you can also check out the Text Trek podcast live on YouTube every Friday night at 7 p.m. Central, or listen to us wherever you get your podcast. We're currently covering each and every episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. We do a deep dive discussion every week. And when Prodigy's back and Picard and Strange New Worlds and all those, we'll be covering them as well. So new content every week. Check out Text Trek.
Well, we look forward to it, and getting ready for that. So tomorrow, Father and I are going to be back together again, along with Captain Jack and possibly Dom, but definitely Captain Jack, over on Trek Central. So go check us out there. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central Time. And then tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to do a discussion. It might have to be a double discussion of the first two episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, so come check that out. But it'll be quick. It'll be a quick discussion. Starfleet Boy fell behind and needs to catch up, so we're going to do that. Every now and then it happens. It happens. You can't do one episode every time. A one-to-one relationship to these episodes, but I do love doing it that way. Anyways, that's all we got. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Thank you to the sub commander who had to decloak. Thank you to Aaron Harvey, who stuck with us in the audience there and gave us some cool facts along the way as well. And to everyone else who joins us regularly, I hope you enjoyed this, and more to come. Live long and prosper. We will see you next time.